World Championship Wrestling. At one point, it was the biggest pro wrestling promotion in the world. So, of course, for a prominent wrestling promotion like this, there were a number of games over numerous consoles that catalog the good and the bad of WCW through its entire lifespan. WCW came into existence after Ted Turner bought the NWA territory Jim Crockett Promotions. The NWA, or National Wrestling Alliance, was a union of territories throughout the U.S. and different parts of North America, though some of the territories listed here, such as the AWA and WWF, now WWE, weren't a part of the alliance. The year prior, Jim Crockett Jr. had bought out other NWA territories, such as Georgia Championship Wrestling and the Mid-South Territory, which ended up becoming UWF. WCW World Championship Wrestling was created by the Fuji Senkai Communications International Company, which is part of a large Japanese media conglomerate. It's almost appropriate, really. The first thing I noticed was during the title screen, a couple of odd bits of information about the talent featured. Like how Ric Flair's signature move was the jumping neck breaker drop, or Lex Luger's ringer, or how about the Games Master, Kevin Sullivan? I guess this was during his Varsity Club days. And lastly, we have Rick Steiner. Woo! You still have a pretty good roster to pick from as well, with Sting, Mike Rotundo, the Road Warriors Hawk and Animal, Dr. Death Steve Williams, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, and Michael P.S. Hayes. And don't forget the WCW Master. Looking at the gameplay, one of the things I thought was pretty cool was being able to pick from a list of moves to do with the directional pad. I did find the controls hard to get used to at first, and well, to be honest, I never got used to the controls. You can only punch and kick until the opponent is groggy, and then you can grapple with A or B and use one of the directions to do a move that you chose earlier. The power bar shows how much damage you'll do with a specific move. Max it out and you finish him off. And looking here, it looks like Michael Hayes did not respect the Booker Man. Wait, did I just get thrown over the top rope? Shouldn't that be a DQ? It's a good thing Bill Watts wasn't in WCW when this game was made. There is a password system, but it seems to be only used to start with win streaks for certain wrestlers. Overall, this is more of like the Black Scorpion when it comes to wrestling games, but it was still a little early. Next is WCW The Main Event for the Game Boy. Another small roster featuring the top WCW stars of the day. I'll pick Steve Austin, he seems pretty OP in all the other games. One of the problems with this and other WCW games at the time is that they're pretty much button mashers. Both A and B do a strike, and you seem to do a grappling move by holding the D-pad and pressing either A or B. You pin with B and that's pretty much it. You lower down your opponent's first bar so you can pin them, though you can also jump off the top rope with a flying crossbody to pin them just as easily. Jeez Louise, what did Johnny B. Bad do to me? I know WCW wasn't making much money in 1993, but it looks like I'm being carried out during the U.S. Civil War. Anyway, let's try someone else. I'll do Rick Rude, and we'll take on, let's say, Ron Simmons. Yeah, this should be a good match here. Maybe I'll do a little better. So, besides the poor design of Ron Simmons, I thought the game had a pretty solid roster, and the gameplay was pretty decent. I definitely found it better than the NES version, at least. Up next is WCW Super Brawl Wrestling for the Super Nintendo. WCW had acquired Hulk Hogan months prior to the release of this game, but even I don't think his involvement would have helped the game much. On top of Hogan not being in the game, a number of WCW talents were gone by this time. Rick Rude, Ron Simmons, Ricky Steamboat, and Barry Windham were gone, and hell, even the Steiner brothers didn't come back to WCW till about 1996. It's like the whole game is 3 years out of date. How are you going to promote WCW when you have a roster that doesn't even exist in your company right now? The best part of the game, though, easily has to be the character select screen, which is one of the better ones I've seen, up of course until some of the later PlayStation WCW games, which I'll get to at a later date.
Invincible. I'm bad. Who deserves the belt? The sexiest.
Maybe I'll give Ron Simmons a shot, and hopefully he'll look better than he was in the Game Boy game. The biggest issue I have with the game is it's definitely a button masher. You have to be in the exact spot to try to do a grappling hold. I just found it very difficult to get used to, even after multiple playthroughs to try to get it a proper review. The game has a password system similar to the NES game where you can wrestle in the title match with one of the wrestlers. There's also a code I found in different places where you can play Sting versus Lex Luger. That would certainly be something considering Luger was in the WWE at the time, but the big issue was the password was too long. After trying to figure out what to do, the cat jumped on my back trying to get my attention and I got frustrated. Not only that, but there is no U, and there is a U in the Lex Luger password. All in all, this is probably the worst wrestling game that I've played. And finally, to end off these quick back-to-back reviews of the first batch of WCW games is WCW vs. the World for the PlayStation. WCW vs. the World is the very first in the line of WCW games created by THQ, and with that we have the debut of the great game engine that would be a part of the future WCW and WWF games. Originally it was known as Virtual Pro Wrestling in Japan, and we get a number of Japanese wrestlers in the game to face off against the WCW stars. For copyright reasons, all the Japanese wrestlers have different names, including Ken Shamrock, who looks more like Disco Inferno. The design of the wrestlers in the title select screen seems to have inspired some of the old roster pictures that Chikara used. Well, that's pretty neat. The gameplay is similar to future THQ wrestling titles, but it's still a case of the engine being really early. There is somewhat of a grappling system like the later games, but the move selection isn't as vast as those games would be, and it doesn't feel as fluid as those titles. I feel like I would have liked it better if I wasn't exposed to the Nintendo 64 games first, and if I had a PlayStation instead of a 64 as a kid instead. In this game you have a spirit meter, which is somewhat similar to the one in those future THQ games. It doesn't give off the word special, but we'll get to that in a future date. Unlike the other games, there feels like there's a lot to do. They have most of the wrestlers that there have been in a wrestling game released in North America at the time, so there's tons of options to work with. Well, that's it for this video. I was looking to do all the WCW games in one, as I bought them all in one bulk purchase. The ones that I didn't have, except for these games, these 64 games. I was thinking of doing these games by themselves due to how popular they were, especially in the 64 era where, you know, the local multiplayer was the big thing, like with GoldenEye, Mario Kart, Smash Brothers, you name it, and these were two of the games that were on that list. So I'm going to do a full review of these two games and their impact next time. Entrance, exit theme, yeah, I did these, yeah, sounds good.